Alright, let's be honest. How many times have you checked the weather, seen a 10-degree temperature drop overnight, and just decided to stay home? You tell yourself, the bite's gonna be dead. No point. What if I told you that's one of the biggest lies in February fishing? Today we're putting a classic belief to the test. What matters more to a lethargic cold water fish? A massive temperature swing, or a few clouds rolling in? Stick with me, and you'll discover a trigger that's far more reliable than your thermometer. This might be the reason your winter trips have been so hit or miss. Think about it. Are we so focused on the big obvious number that we're missing the subtle signal the fish are actually responding to? Let me know in the comments right now. What's your go-to excuse for a tough winter bite? Temperature, pressure, or something else? For generations, we've been taught one simple rule for winter fishing. Stable weather is good, and cold fronts are bad. It's gospel. Every fishing magazine, every old-timer at the boat ramp, they all say the same thing. Watch the temperature. So we do. We become amateur meteorologists, obsessing over a few degrees here or there. We plan our entire trips around avoiding those big, scary temperature drops. We've built our entire cold water strategy on a foundation of temperature stability, but it doesn't always add up, does it? You've had those days, perfect, stable, cold weather, and not a single bite. Then you've had those weird days where everything should be wrong, but you can't keep the fish off your hook. Why? Because we might be tracking the wrong variable. Picture this. It's early February. The forecast was brutal. A cold front ripped through last night, and the air temperature dropped a solid 10, maybe 12 degrees. The kind of morning that makes you question your life choices as you're loading the truck. Most guys would look at that forecast and just roll over in bed. They see that temperature plunge and write the day off completely. But I was curious. The wind had laid down, and the sky was a perfect, clear, high-pressure blue. According to the old rulebook, the fish should have their jaws wired shut. It was the perfect scenario to test this theory. Is the temperature drop the kiss of death everyone says it is? So I get to the lake. Just as expected, it's a ghost town. The water is gin clear and cold. I start off throwing the usual slow winter stuff. A jerkbait with super long pauses. A Ned rig, just letting it soak on the bottom. I'm working a classic winter spot. A steep rocky bank where the sun should be warming things up a little. An hour goes by. Nothing. Not a tap, not a bump, not a follow. The water feels lifeless. It's exactly what you'd expect after such a drastic temperature drop. My confidence is starting to waver. Maybe the old-timers were right all along. Maybe this was just a stupid idea and I should be home with a cup of coffee. But then I noticed something. A thin, high layer of clouds started to drift in from the west. It wasn't a big storm front, just a hazy, milky film spreading across that bright blue sky. It was subtle. If you weren't paying attention, you'd miss it. The sunlight, which was so harsh and direct just a few minutes ago, suddenly became diffused and soft. It was like someone put a giant lampshade over the sun. The whole mood of the lake changed. The glare on the water disappeared. It just felt different, more fishy. Still no bites, but it was the first change of the day that wasn't about the temperature. I make a cast with that same jerkbait to the same spot I'd already hit a dozen times. I give it 2 little twitches and let it sit. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3, and on the 10th second of the pause the line just goes tight. It wasn't a vicious strike, just a heavy weight. I reel down and lean into him, and it's a good one. A solid, healthy February base. After an hour of nothing, in water that felt completely dead, the very first sign of cloud cover produced a fish. Coincidence? Maybe. But my brain started turning. The water temperature hadn't changed a bit. The only thing that changed was the light. So let's break this down. Why would a fish that's been inactive for hours suddenly decide to eat just because of a few clouds? It's about security. Bass and many other predator fish are ambush predators. In that crystal clear high sun condition, they feel exposed. They're vulnerable to birds from above, and the bait fish can see them from a mile away. They tend to tuck into the deepest, darkest cover they can find and just wait it out. They're not actively hunting because the odds are stacked against them. Their world is bright, and they feel like they are on a stage. It's a defensive posture. When that cloud cover rolls in, it's like flipping a switch for them. That soft, diffused light gives them a huge predatory advantage. It breaks up their outline in the water. It makes it harder for bait fish to spot them. Suddenly they feel comfortable leaving that deep cover and roaming around. They feel hidden. They feel stealthy. It's the same reason the bite is often best at dawn and dusk. It's all about that low light condition. The clouds are essentially creating an artificial dusk in the middle of the day, and the fish instinctively know that this is their time to hunt. It's a dinner bell. Okay, so I have a theory now. It wasn't a random bite, it was the clouds. So I start to fish with a new purpose. I'm not just casting anymore, I'm watching the sky. The clouds are getting a little thicker now, creating a consistent overcast condition. I move to a nearby point, another classic winter spot. Instead of just slowly dragging a bait on the bottom, I stick with that jerk bait. I'm thinking the fish are more active now. They're looking up. They're ready to chase something. I'm deliberately fishing for a fish that is in hunting mode, not one that is hunkered down on the bottom. And boom, second cast on the new spot, another one just smokes the jerkbait. This time it was a much more aggressive bite. He didn't just load up on it, he hammered it. This was not the bite of a lethargic, cold-shocked fish. This was the bite of a fish that was actively feeding. 2 fish in 30 minutes after a solid hour and a half of absolutely nothing. The water temperature is still the same. The barometric pressure hasn't moved much. The only variable that has significantly changed is the amount of sunlight hitting the water. The pattern is starting to look pretty solid. Now let's talk about that 10-degree drop again. We're so obsessed with it because, as humans, a 10-degree change feels massive to us. We have to put on a different coat. But we have to remember, fish live in the water. Water is much denser than air and changes temperature far more slowly. That 10-degree drop in air temperature overnight might only translate to a 1 or 2 degree drop in the actual water temperature, especially in a larger body of water. The fish barely notice the temperature change you were so worried about. It's a slow, gradual process for them. A change in cloud cover, however, is immediate. 1 minute the sun is beating down, the next it's gone. The change in the fish's environment is instantaneous and dramatic. It directly affects their vision, their sense of security, and their predatory instincts. It's a switch, not a slow dial like temperature. This is why you can have a bite that is completely dead turn on in a matter of minutes. The fish were there all along, they were just waiting for the right conditions. And those conditions, more often than not in winter, are dictated by light, not by a few degrees of water temperature. Just to prove the point, the universe gave me another test. The clouds started to break up. A big patch of blue sky opened up, and that bright, direct sunlight returned to the area I was fishing. It was like someone turned the stadium lights back on. And guess what happened to the bite? It died. Completely. I spent the next 45 minutes in the bright sun, hitting the same type of cover, and it was like I was back to square one. Not a single bite. The fish that were so aggressive just a few moments before had vanished. They didn't leave the area. They just tucked back into cover and shut down. This is where it gets interesting. I look across the lake and see the cloud line. There's a distinct shadow being cast on the far bank. So I make a decision. I'm not going to fish the spots anymore. I'm going to fish the weather. I fire up the big motor and run across the lake, literally chasing that shadow line. I pull up to a bank that's nearly identical to the one I just left, but this one is under the shade of the clouds. It's a bit of a gamble, but if my theory is right, this is where the active fish should be. First cast into the shade of the clouds, and I get another one. A beautiful fish that absolutely choked a little swim jig. It was incredible. It felt like I had found a cheat code. The lake was divided into 2 zones, the on zone under the clouds, and the off zone in the sun. And the dividing line was moving across the water. By staying in the cloudy area, I was staying where the fish felt comfortable enough to feed. It had absolutely nothing to do with which spot was better, or what the water temperature was. It was 100% about the light conditions. Now, some of you are probably screaming at the screen right now, what about barometric pressure? And that's a fair point. We all know that pressure changes affect fishing. But think about it this way. That big 10-degree temperature drop was caused by a high-pressure system moving in. The pressure was high and stable all morning. The cloud cover that moved in was just a thin, upper-level layer. It wasn't a new low-pressure front. The barometer on my graph barely budged. So while pressure is definitely a huge piece of the puzzle, on this particular day, the immediate observable change that triggered the fish was the light, not a pressure swing. So how do you use this information? It means you need to be more flexible. Stop looking at your weather app the night before and making a final decision. Instead, look for windows of opportunity during the day. Maybe the forecast is for bright bluebird skies, but there's a 2-hour window in the afternoon where some clouds are supposed to roll in. That's your feeding window. That's when you need to be on your absolute best spot making casts. Don't waste your time grinding it out during the high sun, high pressure part of the day. Be strategic. This also changes how you should think about your lure selection. In those bright, sunny conditions, you should be thinking slow and deep. Finesse presentations. Things that you can put right in front of a fish's face that is buried in cover. A Ned rig, a shaky head, a drop shot. But the second that cloud cover moves in, you should think about switching to moving baits. Baits that cover water. A jerk bait, a lipless crankbait, a swim bait. You're now fishing for a fish that is roaming and hunting. You have to adapt your lure to the fish's mood, and that mood is being dictated by the clouds. And this isn't just a bass fishing thing. Think about crappie. On a bright sunny day, they'll bury themselves in the thickest brush pile they can find. When the clouds roll in, they'll suspend and roam outside of that cover. Think about walleye. The cloudier and nastier, the better the bite, right? It's a universal principle for most predator fish. Light is a switch. A sudden temperature drop is more like a slow, dull ache that they can adjust to over time. The change in light is an immediate signal that it's time to eat. We just need to learn to recognize it. The biggest takeaway here is to stop fearing the post-frontal bluebird sky day so much. Yes, the fishing can be tough, but it's not impossible. Those days often have periods of change. A little bit of wind might ripple the surface, breaking up the light penetration. Or, as we saw, a patch of clouds can drift over. These are your windows. The day isn't a total write-off. It's a day where you have to be patient and wait for your moment. The fish are still there. You just have to wait for them to get the right signal to turn on. Think about it from our perspective. If you walk out of a dark movie theater into the bright afternoon sun, what do? You squint. You're disoriented. It takes a minute to adjust. But if you walk out into an overcast day, the transition is much easier. Fish are the same way. That harsh, direct sunlight in clear winter water is like a spotlight on them. The clouds make their whole world more comfortable. It's a simple concept, but we overcomplicate it by staring at numbers on a screen instead of just looking at the sky and the water in front of us. So, after a day on the water that started with 0 bites in perfect-looking, stable, sunny conditions, and ended with a great bag of fish caught exclusively during periods of cloud cover, the conclusion is pretty clear. On that day, the fish cared infinitely more about the change in light than they did about the 10-degree temperature drop from the night before. The temperature drop made me think the bite would be tough. The clouds are what actually made the fish bite. We've been taught to blame the thermometer, but the real trigger was hiding in plain sight, right up in the sky. So let's wrap this up. For years, we've let the thermometer dictate our winter fishing. A big cold snap happens and we stay home. But today's experience shows that might be a huge mistake. The fish didn't seem to care about the 10-degree air temperature drop nearly as much as they cared about the immediate change from bright sun to overcast skies. The real aha moment was realizing the lake was split into 2 zones. An on zone under the clouds and an off zone in the sun. By literally chasing the cloud cover, I was able to stay in the bite. It proves that fish are reacting in real time to light conditions, which are far more dynamic and impactful than the slow-moving change of water temperature. This completely changes how you should plan your February trips. Instead of writing off post-frontal days, look for the windows. look for the cloud cover. Be ready to switch from slow, finesse tactics to faster, moving baits the second the lights get dim. You're not waiting for the water to warm up, you're waiting for the dinner bell of diffused light. Thanks so much for watching and coming along on this little experiment. If this blew your mind a little bit, or if you've seen the same thing on the water, hit that like button. And of course, subscribe for more content that challenges the old way of thinking. Now I have to ask you, after hearing this, what's the one weather factor you'll be paying more attention to on your next trip? Let me know in the comments below. Let's talk about it. See you on the water.